In the Midwest City, Oklahoma Public Library, a branch of the Metropolitan Library System, hangs one of the most significant oil paintings in our region. Wilson Hurley, nationally known landscape painter from Albuquerque, New Mexico, created this triptych painting entitled Summer Skies, Oklahoma. We're going to visit with Wilson Hurley today and take a close look at his painting. What to look for, how to see a painting. Tune up your imagination and be with us for our Creative Crafts program, Wilson Hurley, Summer Skies, Oklahoma.
This is Creative Crafts, produced by the Metropolitan Library System's Community Workshop. Our host is Dan Blanchard, Executive Director of the American Institute of Discussion.
We're very happy to have Wilson Hurley with us today. Wilson is from Albuquerque, New Mexico. He was born in Oklahoma, and he's a graduate of West Point and George Washington University Law School. And he's had numerous one-man shows of his paintings, including one at the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City and at the Gilcrease in Tulsa. We're going to be talking about this very beautiful painting which you saw on the opening and which is behind us right now. Wilson, how did you develop the idea for this piece?
First of all, I came here and looked at the wall and the ambiance of this library at Midwest City. And we were traveling, it was out near the western border, and saw a squall line. And these were the first ideas that I had. And I thought perhaps something in here would look well that had the sky. Mm-hmm. And if you will look behind us, you'll see that the walls are covered with a mauve, kind of a gray rose texture. Yeah. And that, with the masonry and everything and the bricks, is a lovely combination. And rather than to come in, you know, like a stage designer and say, okay, tear it all out, put it in green or something like that, I started thinking passively about what would go well in that environment. And I immediately reached a conclusion with the bright lights coming in. There's a clear story up here and these plate glass doors, that if I went to a very dark painting, I'd end up with the canvas acting as a mirror. And all I get was glare.
Because we do get a lot of light in here.
Yes, you do.
Which is nice, but can also reflect.
It can wreck a painting. You can go too dark. So I said, okay, first of all, I want something more pastel color and high key, not a dark painting. And then I want the color to be a complement to what's behind it. And the clouds in the sky are slightly yellow. They're not pure white. And the trees, of course, have a lot of yellow in them.
And you're talking about real clouds have a lot
real
of yellow.
Cloud.
Yeah, right.
So, therefore, as I envisioned what I wanted as areas over the wall, I more or less was a man hunting for a landscape that I'd already built in my mind. And we saw this squall line out in Oklahoma at the western end of it, and I thought that would be the unifying concept. Because when you looked at the wall, you realized that we had to split it into more than one painting.
Because it would have been just too long as a single painting.
It would have been a cumbrous thing and unattractive as a design for the total wall. So once I got into it, I had a lot of trouble, because when I went from 3 paintings to the idea of one painting composed of 3 parts with a gap in between, I had some learning to do myself.
I'll bet.
And
now, your first idea really was just 3 squares will look better than one real long oblong.
And I think you've got a drawing there that shows the squall line that I saw, and it shows here
Oh, now, is this closer to what you actually saw the first time? That's interesting.
Yes.
Because this is quite a lot different than the final painting as far as what's in the painting.
This was what was in my mind. And over here, we have bright sunlit clouds, open landscape, and then I was thinking of putting shadow in the foreground so that I would have some contrast in the painting. Then a transition piece here, and then a dark, stormy Wagnerian
So that
piece
pretty well,
on the wing.
that part you did keep pretty well.
I kept that idea, but I think it's interesting to take this and look at how it is almost a centerpiece with two little appendages on it. And this will dominate, and this will be the painting of. And oh yes, we see a little bit out this way and a little bit out that way. These didn't have a structural integrity. And so as I progressed in my thinking, I ended up taking all of these and building a solid unit.
Now, what
to
we've just
encompass
seen
all
in
of them.
these drawings, you could take these three paintings and hang them in different rooms, and,
Yes.
and they would work all right as
Yes.
separate paintings. Whereas what you ended up with,
I think that each of the paintings and what I ended up with would suffer hanging by itself. But then when it is shown in conjunction with the other ones, it would improve it, and it would
Which it
improve
does.
the other painting.
now here we can see this is just easy to point at. This is your,
Yes.
really the drawing that you did to do your paintings themselves.
This is when the Midwest City Commission said that they wanted me to go ahead and do the painting. The art committee had chosen me to do it. This was my first preliminary drawing. You can see the cross-hatching here where I scaled it up to the canvas.
Now,
And-
I should say, the first drawing we saw was in June of '87,
Yes,
and the one we're looking at here is around in the fall of '87.
yes. This would be just before Thanksgiving.
Right, okay.
And you can see a 21-foot image here, sloping down there, sloping down here, slightly arched, a common horizon, and then even here, although there were a lot of changes made between this and the final painting, you see me trying to hook the eye up here and over here so that a viewer looking at this painting here would not get trapped in the foreground, but would go up and then
I see.
look at the sky. It's kind of a
Give
psychological
the eye an
thing,
avenue to move up and around. is
but
what
you
you're
really
talking about.
do guide the eye through the composition. And so all of these things, I was trying to integrate them.
There we can see the painting itself again, and
Yes.
that shows the way
And-
that motion is set.
What happened was, Daniel, as I was working on this thing and doing these paintings, I had several learning experiences.
That's the
First
way
of
to do
all,
it.
I found out that single paintings are for sissies.
And these test a person, right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
right, because I found out, for instance, that you get such a benefit by getting this gap between the wing piece and the centerpiece because you have a different idea of what is beautiful than I do.
I see.
Your whole sense of symmetry and beauty is slightly different from everybody else's in the world. If I had painted every line and described my sense of beauty for every part of this painting, it would not be as beautiful as a painting where I describe the end of this storm and then the center of this storm, but leave you 2 feet between the canvas.
Okay.
Because then you put your own resolution to the shape of the cloud, your own resolution to how those cottonwood trees form along the far bank. And it pleases you better than an explicit exposition of it.
So you're letting us do part of the painting.
Of course, and it makes it more pleasing to more people.
Okay, now this is, you'd been working for a long time on the painting
Yes.
when you came to this drawing.
I see that the date here is New Year's. And what had happened was I had taken the first drawing, I had painted out, somehow it wasn't working. This wing was working, this wing was working, and the entire composition was collapsing through the center. And so I just decided that I was going to let this thing be framed and see what it would look like in a frame. And Bob LaPlante,
Now you framed it knowing you hadn't finished it.
oh yes, I
Right.
knew I was in trouble. I
Okay.
knew that I would take it to Midwest City and they would say, tough, Wilson.
So it was time to get
No
to work
cigar.
even harder.
Yeah, I was in trouble, but I decided to go ahead, get it framed, and see what the paintings would look like framed, and perhaps that would help me in my proportions and how I was going to go. And Bob LaPlante framed them with a nice carving in it, very subtly framed.
Yeah, it is beautifully framed.
And then I took them home and I had 3 easels.
Would you say 65 linear feet of frame? So
Yes, the perimeter of this work is 65 feet, hand-carved. Tell me about it. But in any event, all of a sudden it occurred to me, all right, if you're going to compose this, why not compose it with the 25-foot area? And if I was hunting for where my center of interest would be, and frankly, I was just taking what they call golden sections.
okay.
And the most pleasing section would run on this orange line here for the whole area. I didn't like it for 2 reasons. One, it was very close to the
Right onto
margin
the
of the
edge.
center. And then I said, no, rather than do the recess, plan it for the canvas itself, for a 21-foot spread. It saved my life that I did it, because if by doing that, what happened was we brought everything here. The architect said 25 feet, but we ended up with 22 feet, 8 inches. So you will notice when you look at the array that the end pieces are very close to the wall. It's pleasing, but I set my center of interest into the painting farther. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew that the dark shadow I had in the original painting was breaking it. So I took that out, just filled it in with white, and got to work on it.
Would it be fair to say the center of interest is where the eye is going to travel through that center fairly regularly as you look at the total painting? Is that a...
All lines in a painting tend to lead the eye somewhere that is a visual climax, and there can only be one point in a painting. And in a triptych, what I had tried to do in the original concept was have a climax in each painting. Well, I was trumping my ace, and I realized it had to be in one painting and it had to work. So what I did was I chose this, and what it ended up being was a triangular white cloud right here in the upper part of the painting. You can see it here. And then I decided that I was going to add to the tree on the right side so that I would stop your eye by bringing it up to help you with those ice clouds.
That's up across here.
Up across here.
Yeah.
So that as you looked,
There we can
the
see
eye
it.
would come up.
There are the ice clouds.
And then over here, I was going to drop, this is the anvil top of the thunderstorm,
Okay.
to enclose it, and then bring your eye up this way on the far end. All of these things were really decided after January 1st.
That's
Then-
amazing, because you'd been working on it for a long, long time.
Oh, I had been over a month of every day, probably a 70-hour week. Yes. And so I just decided that I couldn't be afraid of the painting. I had to take it apart and integrate it. One of the things that was fascinating, when I started to paint, I started on the right wing piece.
That was the first one you
Yes.
worked on? Okay.
And then
The ice cloud.
I mixed the same colors and painted the center part, and the two didn't match. And then when I did the left wing piece, it was a little bit more yellow than the centerpiece. So I had a very horrible problem, because I'm not really a recipe painter, that all the things I painted in the three paintings weren't quite the same color.
But you do mix your paints very, very carefully. So
Yes,
that,
before
so that
I
they
apply
should come
them.
pretty close.
They
yeah.
should. But then what I had to do was, when I had all of them covered and all of them framed, took them out of the frames, put them on 3 easels, and then I would mix paint. And I'd paint one and then move to the next one with the same glop so that I would get a match.
So to carry through, in other words.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I started with the right foreground, and you will notice that it is very detailed, has wildflowers, and the light is about 90 degrees to how you're looking.
And that tree
So-
sits right at the right side and is very clean and clear.
Yes, and it's very dark and it catches the eye. But then I took that regime of intimate detail and took it into the right corner foreground of the centerpiece. But by the time we're moving around to the left, we're moving our head away from the sun, we see fewer shadows, and the ground tends to flatten with light.
And we can see it do that right there.
And therefore, you get, I hope, a psychological notion that you're seeing a different lighting condition as you scan across this triptych.
And you used less wildflowers as you go across, although naturally, of course, they'd grow there. You don't see them the same way.
You don't see them the same way, and you're looking slightly farther out from underfoot. And then I lead you back in through these trees and into the background on the river by adding atmospheric colors to the color that I was using for the shadows in the middle ground and foreground. By the time you get back here in the right painting to the farthest horizon, the gray of the detail on the ground matches the gray under the cloud. And
right.
from there, I come up into the cloudscape.
Okay, and we can see it soften there. We're just now looking at that
Now the cloudscape
once
is
more. There we
done
are.
with graduations in the same way. The sky has depth just like the ground. And so the foreground white cloud, which ended up being the center of the composition, whether
now that's
everybody says, oh, look at that little white cloud. No, that isn't what I mean. What I mean by center of interest is a resolution to the composition.
Right. And
But-
it's almost in a triangular shape as
Yeah.
we look at it here.
Yes, and its base is essentially darker gray than the gray behind it. You can see that going back out till it becomes about the same color as the horizon. So there is an atmospheric perspective in the sky as well as in the ground.
Now we're looking at it in such a way on the screen right now that we can see that depth. And
Yes.
the depth comes from exactly what you've described there.
So what we had to do, Daniel, was we had to take the entire painting after we had done 3 paintings and integrate them as if they were a single painting and yet leave gaps between them. And I had a dandy time doing it.
But
I
it works
enjoyed
very,
it.
very well.
This was a short year.
But it takes quite a lot of concept.
Yes.
Well, now, when you saw that squall line in western Oklahoma, the landscape's quite a lot different there than it is
yeah.
here around Midwest City, so you had to add a few blackjack trees and so on, and that wasn't a real simple procedure.
No, because it was the middle of the winter.
Yeah.
And so the people at Midwest City and you and the library all pitched in, and I found out more about Oklahoma trees than I thought was imaginable. I think that you probably have more trees here than Borneo, but in any event,
We brought a lot in and planted them, but not the blackjacks.
when you're working conceptually, this kind of detail gets you to paint a veracity into your work, like the little wildflowers and the sage and the ground cover. And so what you do is you take this and you apply it to the painting, and don't really try to copy anything, but get the signature or personality of the flora. And then,
You said a clump of trees has a personality.
Of course it
in the
does.
same way that a single tree will.
they grow, they must sense each other, because they'll all form a common outline. Well, everything in nature has this, and a squall line, like we have down here on the plains, is it's composed the same way. For instance, in this one, if you were to look at the right panel,
Okay, that's where we're looking right now.
you can see this is rather compressed. If I were to try to paint this thing as it actually existed, this would be far out off the wall.
You'd need another 12,
Yes.
18-foot painting. Right?
Right. But what happens as the air starts to move, the moisture in the air is displaced upward, and you form these ice clouds. And so we have them here, and then we have the great wedge of weather moving, and off the top we have a valance of an anvil top. And you can see the line here moving back through the center picture, and then the trailing edge of the anvil top is over here in the left panel.
Okay, we can see one edge now as it carries along.
And what is going on in that cloud, of course,
And there's
is,
the other. Yeah.
is that we're all full of droplets of water. And then when it gets up so high, it freezes and it forms this smoky top to it.
Would it be fair to say that particularly on that over there, that it's actually just smashed up against a cold layer of air is really what's-
Exactly, yes. It goes up against the stratosphere, and in Oklahoma, it does not stop, I assure you.
There's a long way to go.
You have a valance out there of this ice, and then there is a cloud. It gets so much energy that it will go up and pierce into the stratosphere. But these are really probably the greatest storms on Earth are in Oklahoma.
They have a lot of power.
Yes, and that's why I thought it would be appropriate here in Midwest
Yeah.
City to show one of these.
Well, it's now this is a realistic objects that you have here, but the total
Yes.
painting is absolutely imaginary and requires more of a feat of imagination, really, even than the gathering of facts, which of course is also important.
Well, put it this way, I think the painting was primarily an abstract, as we saw in the diagrams. And then what you do is you hang these realistic images on that abstract design to make it work. But the whole thing was conceptual. As a matter of fact, the clouds were completely changed from what I saw. That was just a point of departure.
Yeah, we
And
saw
then-
those in that beginning drawing, and,
Yeah.
and they're much different here.
Yes, because that would not really work as a triptych. I don't know if it would work as anything. I haven't
Just haven't tried it that way.
I
You
haven't
did-
tried to draw it
You
that
did the
way.
painting that fits there. Something else that occurs to me in looking at it, and of course living around this region, is that I don't believe it would be in any way possible to see a scene like that anywhere in Oklahoma any longer, because there are plowed fields and other things. So it's almost historical again in another sense. Conceptual in the sense of...
It isn't so much historical as it avoids those distractions. That's one of the beauties of a conceptual painting, is that you don't have to put in the silo or the
Right.
freeway overpass or these things. And you don't have to say, well, it's really there, therefore I have to paint it. And I know that makes some people uneasy, because they will say, well, now, exactly where were you standing?
Right.
And what were you looking at? And the notion of the low hill and the cottonwoods came from seeing the North Canadian River. And so I try to say that, and they say, yes, but exactly where? And so I think that it should be explained that this was out of the head, and this was what I felt typically looked like Oklahoma.
And nearly a year of total activity to get it
Yes.
here with the railing around it. It has a security system in front of it. It's hung very, very carefully with lighting, which you selected and
Yes.
was part of the
What we used
installment.
were mobile lights, so that we could illuminate the painting with these floodlights uniformly. When we came in, they had lights, but they were so close to the wall that they really couldn't shine on the painting. And so we had to put lights out farther from the painting so we could get an angle on it to illuminate them. And then, of course, we had to worry a little bit about what the ambient lighting of the whole room was like. So with all of these considerations, we were very pleased with the amount of illumination that we got in here. Then
Absolutely.
they decided to put this barrier on the bottom, keep people from walking into the paintings. And when they put that in, then we had to raise the
Raised it
paintings a
slightly.
little bit.
Okay, we're at the end of our time, and while we're talking, I'd like to point out some of these materials, and I'll show them, and also like to thank you, Wilson Hurley,
Thank
for
you.
being with us, and thank you for being with us on Creative Crafts.
This has been Creative Crafts, produced by the Metropolitan Library System's Community Workshop. Our host has been Dan Blanchard, Executive Director of the American Institute of Discussion.